Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're interested in vocal technique, pick up my ebook called Becoming a Natural Singer, or if you want one-on-one help, book a lesson through my website or drop me an email, links in the description. So I had a question by a student last week regarding what's called the Bernoulli Effect. And this is the idea that as we connect the vocal cords and blow air through, we don't really need to engage any more musculature to maintain consistent closure. The idea being is that the airflow that we press through mediates the closure, and essentially asking my thoughts about it. And I wanted to flesh out this idea and flesh out my thinking regarding just closure in general lately, because it's changed particularly over the last 6 months, but certainly over the last year and a half, as my own voice has become more balanced. I realised that one of the challenges I've had is the misinterpretation of information I'm hearing from coaches and online and through reference points in my own singing. So we can boil down to some degree this idea of asking two opposing questions. So we would have the question, does airflow mediate closure, or does closure mediate airflow? And what I would suggest is that both can be true at the same time. And what I mean by that is, rather than thinking of airflow and closure as separate things, we really want to think of them as two things that really coexist together. And what I mean by that is, if one is compromised, the other is compromised. A lot like when I talk about if vertical adjustment and horizontal adjustment of the chords, if one of those is compromised, the other one becomes harder. The same is true of airflow and closure. And what I mean by that is if you blow consistent air, but the vocal cords aren't connecting consistently, you're going to have airflow issues and you're going to have problems with breaking. Conversely, if you have consistent closure, but your airflow is not consistent, you're going to have oversqueeze, you're going to have breaking, you're going to have the same type of experience. So it's a bit like a chicken and egg scenario. Which comes first, the airflow or the closure? I mean, I would suggest that we breathe consistent closure on a lip roll, for example. And you can think of the lip roll as the vocal cords, mirroring the vocal cords. Now, what happens if we just let go of the lips? We have air coming through, but we have a lack of consistency in the closure, or a break. What happens if we stop breathing out, or we breathe out inconsistently? We're going to have issues. We're going to have louder, quieter sounds. We're going to have no balance there. Yeah. Typically what happens with the airflow is people stop breathing out and they get this squeezy feeling in the throat. They get overcompression. So we can either mediate that overcompression with this idea of letting go of closure, or we can mediate it by just blowing more air through. But in the end, we have to navigate this balance with a consistent pressure through the voice, consistent sense of pressing on the voice. And that's what leads us towards this idea of consistent closure, breathing through evenly and adjusting evenly without any motion or any inconsistency in things. Now, specifically in regards to the Bernoulli effect, in a sense I advocate for it. I think it certainly is something real, and it's something that, as I've learned to mediate my own squeeze, I've found is very relevant, particularly for people that over-squeeze. It's less relevant, or in fact it can even be of detriment to people who under-squeeze. But for over-squeezers, here's the thing. They hear coaches talking about compression, closure, squeeze, all these things, and they make an over-adjustment to where they're like, oh, I'm so compressed, I've got all this closure. And it's like, okay, yeah, you've got closure, but it's so heavy and tight, it's never going to please anybody's ear. But it potentially can coordinate healthily, even though it's not pleasing to listen to. Now, I myself made this over-adjustment for many years. I was like, oh, in my mix, I'm over-squeezing. And it's like, okay. So how do we get rid of this? We have to get this sense of, you don't need to work hard for closure. Back off. It's just a little bit going from here to here. a little bit. Yeah, I'm just connecting here rather than here. It's just a little bit. Now, when you experience that slight grip, it's very subtle, particularly if you're an over squeezer, it's going to feel like almost nothing. Conversely, for an under squeezer, they're going to really have to kind of think, oh, I've got to hold on a little bit there. So my point being is it's contextual. The degree to which we experience quote-unquote squeeze is relative to our own context as a singer. Over squeezers experience this sense of very little connection and a sense of really letting go of closure altogether when they connect properly. Under squeezers experience very much a sense of having to hold on a little bit to get through there. Now, the other thing that compounds this idea of over squeeze is this asymmetrical relationship between closure and pitch adjustment. And what I mean by that, and I spoke about it numerous times recently, is that 90% of the sensation we have as singers in the throat is the vertical adjustment, is the CT adjustment. Particularly in head voice, we get a lot of sensation, even on falsetto type qualities, where most of the sensation is going to be the CT adjustment. That's where you're going to feel most of the quote-unquote squeeze in the voice, the CT adjustment. Now, conversely, the arytenoid or closure adjustment is very, very gentle. The squeeze that we have on that horizontal is very, very gentle and sophisticated and finessed. So if a coach is saying squeeze and you interpret a symmetrical squeeze, i.e. you interpret, okay, well, I'm having to work hard to get higher, so I guess I've got to work hard to get that closure as well, you're going to get in a lot of trouble, and you're going to misinterpret and misunderstand when we talk about this idea of squeezing on closure. So this asymmetrical relationship poses a challenge, because on the one side we've got to encourage singers to hold on a lot to the CT muscles in head, but in the other regard we've got to get them to hold on very subtly to closure. And this is something that's super challenging to get across to people that struggle with their voice. It's super hard to learn if we don't have independence between the muscle groups in the throat, and it takes time. So I can show people where medium closure is, I can show people where balance is, but it takes time to develop enough independence between the muscle groups to really feel consistent balance throughout the voice because of this asymmetrical relationship that we have. Now, if an over squeezer gets balance, they can really think of closure as just a little tiny nudge and then breathe out for sure. But from a coach's perspective, we just have to remember that there's a broader context to fixing problems. For some students that under squeeze, everything's like this. If you just tell them to breathe out, all you're going to get is an area quality. So you have to encourage them to just hold on a little bit to connection to get those chords to stay together. But like I said, it's a subtle grip, and we've got to very much respect that, because under squeeze and over squeeze are both big issues for struggling singers. It just so happens that most of us have a very strong bias in one direction or the other when we're struggling. We'll have a lot of letting go of coordinations and we can't grip at all, or we have too much holding on and we over squeeze. So as a coach, I'm trying to help you balance. I'm trying to help you, okay, just a little bit, but I don't want to push you too far in the wrong direction, because you're going to end up with problems regardless. Too far, too much of one thing is always bad for singers. Now, just to give you context in terms of my own experience, the reason I'm talking about this is because I was somebody that over squeezed for many years, and I also talked about compression and closure and you got to squeeze, you got to get those chords together. And I learned the hard way through performing in front of audiences that didn't care, that didn't want to listen to me because it didn't sound nice, despite it being coordinated, despite it being kind of ish okay. It wasn't what I wanted. And I had to learn through many, many failures that it didn't sound good and it wasn't right. And then I had to go back to the drawing board and be a lot more gentle and finessed with my closure to really start balancing out my head voice and mid-range. So I had to learn the hard way the cost of lacking balance in your voice, and I had to kind of reset my perspective many times. So now my sense is always be gentle. Be gentle, see what you can get with as little work as possible, and get as much isolation as you can before you start holding on. Anyway, guys, those are my thoughts for today. So let me know in the comments what you think about this. As always, subscribe, thumbs up, and I'll catch you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.